Welcome back. I would like to introduce you to Dane Nutty. Dane was born and raised in Indianapolis and has always held a deep admiration and respect for first responders. Dane pursued a master's in health administration from the Fairbanks School of Public Health at IUPUI with a focus on leveraging his skills to make a difference in the community. Dane channeled his passion for volunteer work into a career in nonprofit development and advocacy. He is committed to fostering partnerships and developing innovative solutions to address the complex public safety challenges facing the community.
To be an ally to the Black and Brown community, the first thing that I've learned in my work is really to listen, to create authentic relationships. And I think not just listening to hear the words or listening to think about what you're going to say next or how you're going to respond, but really trying to listen to hear the words that they're saying and truly understand them. I think when I reflect upon my time prior to the work that I do in domestic violence and other really important issues, I don't know that I had authentic relationships with Black and Brown people, probably first and foremost because I didn't listen. And so that's been the number one learning I've had. And then beyond that, listening to learn. And so not only hearing what they say, but trying to understand and be vulnerable to say, hey, I don't really understand what you mean by that or what the perspective is. Can you tell me what you mean? And with those types of conversations, you create a more authentic, a more genuine relationship. And I think through that, you can be a stronger ally for the Black and Brown community. I think one thing we've learned from a business perspective in order to support the Black and Brown community is to really look at every level of your organization to determine if you're creating an equitable, inclusive environment. And sometimes people think that occurs because they have a policy or they have an affinity group, but they truly don't bear out those policies in practice. And I think it takes really intentional strategy to look at everything from recruitment to training to promotion to leadership development to determine if you truly are creating an environment that supports the Black and Brown community. One thing we've learned at the Indy Public Safety Foundation, and particularly in our work in domestic violence, is to truly value lived experience. And again, that's something that takes intentional and strategic effort, but a lot of times we, as organizations, as business leaders, we overemphasize or we value words on a resume or certain types of education or certifications, and we devalue something that is the most valuable, which is an individual's lived experience. And when you implement that into the culture of your organization, you see that you not only support the Black and Brown community, but all underrepresented communities. As you look at the procedures you can implement in your organization or in your business to support the Black and Brown community, you really need to take a holistic look at everything from start to finish. So at every practice, at every procedure, from recruitment all the way up to promotion and leadership development. I think when you really take an intentional look at that, you can very quickly see the areas in which you're not creating an inclusive or an equitable environment. And beyond that, you want to make sure your culture also is open to feedback. If you're going to work with the Black and Brown community or any underrepresented community, there's history that leads to a certain level of trauma, to a certain level of mistrust, to a certain level of hesitancy to engage with leadership. So you have to be able to not only receive that feedback and create a culture that they feel open to give it, but then you have to implement it and at least validate their feedback to ensure that you're creating an environment that's supportive. I think if you create an environment that's supportive of all underrepresented communities and look strategically at your practices, you see that the culture shifts. So everybody works in a better team. You see that there's feedback from everybody happens more often than in most business environments. And what you see is that there's a healthy level of conflict. So you've got perspectives from different people, from different backgrounds, from different races, ethnicities, different cultures. And when that feedback all kind of comes together in the leadership team, if you've done it right, you come up with the best solution for your organization that not only advances your mission, but ensures that you're staying true to the values of your organization. In our organization, we live true to our values, both in the staff and the programming that we provide to the community. First, we need to take care of our staff, right? So if we create an equitable environment where they feel valued and supported, we know that the service they provide to the community is going to be even better. So through our domestic violence program, we work with people and staff the organization with people that have lived experience with domestic violence. They know firsthand what it's like to be in that situation. And if the lived experience plus a supportive environment combined, the service we're providing to survivors and victims of domestic violence just becomes even more impactful to our community. I think our conversations with our kids, parents, and friends need to be the challenging conversations. I think a lot of times we avoid or create a defensive posture when it comes to conversations about racism and inequity. And so at that point, we're not really moving progress forward. So with our kids, with our family members, with our friends, even with our colleagues, we need to really have those very hard, very challenging discussions to get to the root of our differences so we can understand that at the end of the day, we all have a lot more in common than we think. At our organization, when we try to create an environment that's supportive and inclusive of the Black and brown community, we live by a kind of a motto that you may have heard before, but it's a little different. So oftentimes when you're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, you hear about adding seats to the table. So for years, the table was filled with typically white men. Right? So let's add seats to the table, whether that's gender, whether that's race, whether that's orientation. And in our organization, we believe that should be true, but we also believe you should give up your seat at the table. And so as a white man, it's not necessarily my place to be at the table every time. And so not just adding somebody next to me, but giving my seat up in order to lift up a voice, lift up a lived experience, lift up somebody that might have an even better idea of how to advance our mission. Something individuals can do to support the Black and brown community is not only listen and learn and create authentic relationships, but when they do hear something that is contrary to their values, call it out. And that's something we often miss. If your Black and brown friends don't see you acting upon being an ally, they're not going to see you as an ally. And so it's very important that you call out racism, that you call out bigotry, that you call out inequity when you see it, and start that conversation, even if it may be a hard one. If you are looking to have those hard conversations with your friends and family members and don't really know how to start that, the first thing I would say is to do some learning. So whether that's a documentary or film, and there's an incredible volume of films about the world and the history of the Black and brown population, books, read a book about it. I think really start to gain some information. Then there's a lot of resources here locally, whether that's with organizations throughout the city like the Urban League or the NAACP, or even in our own organization, the Indy Center for Conflict Resolution, which can teach people how to have very hard conversations. So I think one thing is just to have the conversation, and that takes courage, it takes bravery. Even if you don't think that first conversation is gonna go well, I would say even if the outcome of that first conversation doesn't feel like it was productive, it probably was. At least you've uncovered kind of that emotional, that guttural response to these types of conversations, and set yourself up for a better next step.